My name is Viola, 28 years old, and I dedicated my life to teaching children with special needs, finding purpose in their progress. When I met Daniel 3 years ago, I never imagined my wedding day would arrive with an empty house and a devastating letter. My sister Laurel always needed to outshine me, but taking our parents to Paris the morning of my wedding, that was a new low. What she never bothered to learn was who Daniel really was. If you are watching this, tell me where you are from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button and stick around to see how my sister's attempt to humiliate me backfired in the most spectacular way possible. I grew up in Boston in what you would call a perfectly average middle-class family. My father Thomas worked as an accountant at a small firm, while my mother Margaret taught piano lessons from our modest home. Money was always tight, but my parents did their best to provide for Laurel and me. What we lacked financially, they tried to make up for with love and encouragement. Laurel was born 2 years before me, and from my earliest memories, she was the golden child. She had this naturally wavy auburn hair that caught the sunlight just right, excelled in academics without seeming to try, and had a confidence that drew people to her. Teachers would often say, "You must be Laurel Hamilton's sister," with that expectant look in their eyes. The unspoken comparison was always there. I struggled with reading comprehension throughout elementary school. Words jumbled on the page, and I had to work twice as hard as everyone else. When I was 9, a perceptive teacher realized I had a learning disability and helped get me the support I needed. That experience changed everything for me. I went from feeling stupid to understanding I simply learned differently. By high school, I had not only caught up, but developed a passion for helping other kids who struggled like me. While I found my calling, Laurel continued to collect achievements like trophies. Valedictorian. Full scholarship to Brown University. Captain of the debate team. My parents tried not to show favoritism, but you could see the extra sparkle in their eyes when discussing Laurel's accomplishments. When I brought home a B+ on a paper I had worked on for weeks, my mother would say, "Good job, sweetie." When Laurel brought home another perfect report card, there would be a special dinner and endless praise. One memory stands out vividly. I was 16 and had just been selected to participate in a special summer program for future educators. I was thrilled as only 20 students in the state were chosen. The night I shared my news, Laurel announced she had been accepted for an internship at a prestigious law firm. My news became a footnote to her achievement. "That sounds nice, Viola," my mother had said after spending 10 minutes asking Laurel questions about her internship. "Will that program help your college applications?" College brought some relief as I moved into a dorm at Boston University. For the first time, I could build my identity separate from Laurel's shadow. I studied special education, joined clubs, and made friends who knew me as just Viola, not as Laurel's sister. I thrived in that environment, discovering strengths I never knew I had. Meanwhile, Laurel graduated summa cum laude and immediately landed a job at a top financial firm. Her career advanced rapidly, each promotion seemingly bigger than the last. Every family gathering became a stage for Laurel's latest success story. Our parents, especially our father, beamed with pride at her 6-figure salary and downtown apartment. "Your sister works so hard," my mother would tell me while we washed dishes after holiday meals. Always pushing herself to the next level. The subtext was clear. Why couldn't I be more like her? What they failed to see was that I was building something meaningful too. I had become a special education teacher at an inclusive elementary school, developing innovative programs that were making real differences in children's lives. My salary was modest, but my work was fulfilling. Still, in my family's eyes, helping children overcome learning barriers somehow didn't measure up to Laurel's corporate achievements. As we entered our late 20s, Laurel's competitive nature only intensified. She would casually drop into conversation how she was being considered for another promotion or how she was dating a surgeon or an investment banker. Each time I shared good news, she found a way to one-up me. When I mentioned being recognized by the school district for my teaching methods, she announced she had just closed a multi-million-dollar deal. The dynamic took a toll on me. I began dreading family gatherings and found myself holding back from sharing personal news. I developed a support network outside my family, particularly my best friend Tessa, who understood the situation without me having to explain. Tessa would remind me that success isn't measured by salary or status, but by impact and fulfillment. When I met Daniel, I finally found someone else who valued me exactly as I was. His mother, Grace, quickly became another source of support, treating me with the unconditional warmth I had always craved from my own family. The contrast between Grace's genuine interest in my work and my own mother's polite but distant acknowledgement was painful. "You have a real gift," Viola Grace told me once after I shared a story about helping a student overcome a reading challenge. "Those children are so fortunate to have you." Such simple words, but they meant everything to me. As my relationship with Daniel grew stronger, and our wedding approached, the dynamics with my family, especially Laurel, became increasingly strained. I hoped that my happiness might finally be enough to earn their wholehearted support. I was wrong. 4 years ago, our school started a community volunteer program where professionals would come in once a week to read with students who needed extra support. Daniel Harrison signed up as one of those volunteers, listing his occupation simply as business consultant. I remember the first day he came in wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt, carrying a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are. There was nothing flashy about him, just a genuine warmth that immediately put the children at ease. He sat cross-legged on the floor with my most challenging student, Noah, who struggled with severe dyslexia and usually refused to participate in reading activities. I used to hate reading too. I overheard Daniel telling Noah, "Words would get all mixed up for me. Took me forever to figure it out." Noah looked up with surprise. "You couldn't read good either." Daniel laughed. "Not at all. But we just need different strategies. Want me to show you some tricks that helped me?" By the end of that session, Noah was engaged with the book in a way I had never seen before. I was impressed not just by Daniel's patience, but by his authenticity. When the children left for music class, I approached him to thank him. "That was amazing," I said. "Noah rarely connects with new people." Daniel smiled, and I noticed his eyes first kind and intelligent. I meant what I told him. I struggled with reading until middle school. Had a great teacher who changed everything for me. Guess I'm trying to pay that forward. We started talking about teaching approaches and learning differences, and suddenly an hour had passed. He asked if I wanted to continue the conversation over coffee sometime. I said yes without hesitation. Our first date was at a small cafe near the school. I learned that Daniel had grown up in Connecticut, studied business and education at NYU, and was passionate about educational access. He asked thoughtful questions about my work and listened intently to my answers. There was none of the usual first date peacocking, where men tried to impress me with their accomplishments. Daniel seemed genuinely interested in who I was not in, showcasing himself. As we continued dating, I was struck by Daniel's modest lifestyle. He lived in a nice but not extravagant apartment, drove a practical car, and seemed unfazed by material things. He often suggested simple dates like walks in the park or cooking dinner together. When he did take me to nice restaurants, he never made a show of it. 3 months into our relationship, Daniel invited me to a charity gala. It was the first formal event we attended together, and I borrowed a dress from Tessa because I couldn't afford to buy something new on my teacher's salary. Daniel picked me up wearing a tuxedo that made him look like he had stepped out of a magazine. "You clean up nice," I teased suddenly, feeling a little insecure about my borrowed dress. "You look beautiful," he said, simply in a way that made me believe him. When we arrived at the gala, I was surprised by how many people greeted Daniel by name. The event was for an educational foundation providing resources to underfunded schools, a cause close to my heart. During the dinner, I noticed our table was in a prime location near the stage. The foundation director stopped by specifically to thank Daniel for his support. "The Harrison family has been our biggest champion," she said warmly. I gave Daniel a questioning look after she left. "Harrison Enterprises is my family's company," he explained with a slight shrug. "My father, Thomas, started it as a small real estate development firm 30 years ago. It grew more than anyone expected." How much more, I asked, suddenly realizing there might be more to Daniel's modest demeanor than I had understood. Daniel hesitated. "Enough that we can help with causes we believe in, like educational equity." It wasn't until later that evening, when another guest referred to Daniel as the Harrison heir, that I began to grasp the full picture. A quick internet search that night revealed that Harrison Enterprises was one of the largest commercial real estate development companies on the East Coast, with properties throughout the country and expanding internationally. The Harrison family was not just wealthy, they were in the realm of the ultra-wealthy. When I confronted Daniel the next day, he was apologetic but honest. "I didn't hide it intentionally," he explained, "but I've seen how people change when they know about my family's money. Suddenly I'm not Daniel anymore. I'm a Harrison, a wallet, not a person." I understood his hesitation better than he knew. Hadn't I spent my life being Laurel's sister rather than just Viola? "I fell for the guy who sits on the floor with struggling readers," I told him. "Not for your last name or your bank account." As our relationship deepened, I came to appreciate Daniel's desire to live normally. He had seen too many of his peers become defined by family wealth, losing themselves in extravagance and entitlement. Daniel's parents had raised him to understand the privilege and responsibility that came with their fortune. He worked seriously at the family business, but was determined to make his own contributions beyond wealth management. When Daniel proposed a year and a half later during a private picnic in the community garden we had helped build, I said yes immediately. We agreed on a meaningful but modest wedding, something that reflected our values rather than his family's wealth. Daniel was fully supportive of my wish to keep his family background private from my family. "They should get to know the real me first," he said, "not some preconception based on money." When Daniel met my family for the first time at a dinner at my parents' home, Laurel was immediately dismissive. I could see her cataloging his unpretentious clothes and low-key manner, mentally filing him under not impressive enough. She barely engaged with him during dinner, instead steering the conversation toward her recent promotion. "The finance sector is really where the interesting work is happening right now," she said pointedly. "What did you say you do again, David?" "Daniel," I corrected. "He's in business consulting." Laurel gave a thin smile. "How nice. Entry level." Daniel handled her condescension with grace, neither correcting her assumptions nor playing into them. "I've been fortunate to work on some interesting projects," he said simply. Later, when Daniel excused himself to help my father with dishes, Laurel leaned over to me. "He seems nice enough, but I thought you would aim higher, Vi. You always settle." The comment stung, but Daniel's quiet confidence had given me a new resilience. For the first time, I felt secure enough in myself and my choices not to let Laurel's judgment affect me. Daniel had shown me what unconditional support looked like, and it was changing how I saw myself. As wedding planning began, I was the happiest I had ever been. Daniel and I were building a partnership based on shared values and genuine connection. His family welcomed me warmly, particularly his mother Grace, who never made me feel less than for my modest background or teaching career. In fact, she often told Daniel how lucky he was to have found someone with such passion and heart. "Teaching is the most important profession there is," she told me once. "You're shaping the future one child at a time." For the first time in my life, I felt fully valued for exactly who I was. I just wished my own family could see me the same way. Daniel and I decided on a spring wedding at a charming historic inn outside Boston. We wanted something intimate and meaningful, rather than extravagant, with around 100 guests, including family, friends, and colleagues. The venue had beautiful gardens for the ceremony and a renovated barn for the reception. Nothing flashy, but elegant in its simplicity. "This is perfect," I said when we first toured the place. "It feels like us." Daniel agreed. "Authentic, not pretentious. I love it." My parents seemed hesitant when we shared our plans. My mother fingered the venue brochure with a slight frown. "It looks quaint," she said finally. "Have you considered the Grand Hotel downtown? Your cousin Melissa had her wedding there. So elegant." "This is what we want, Mom," I explained. "Something more personal." My father cleared his throat awkwardly. "About the finances, we have some savings set aside for your wedding, but it's not substantial. With Laurel's education costs and the economy these past few years." "Please don't worry about that," I assured him. "Daniel and I are covering most of it ourselves." What I didn't mention was that Daniel's parents had generously offered to pay for everything. We had declined their initial offer, wanting to handle it ourselves, but they insisted on gifting us the photography and flowers, which Daniel accepted on our behalf, after seeing my struggle to fit everything into our budget. "Let them do this," he had urged. "It makes them happy, and wedding photography isn't something you want to compromise on." Laurel's reaction to our wedding plans was predictably critical. She stopped by my apartment unannounced one evening when Daniel was working late, ostensibly to help with wedding preparations. "A barn reception," she said, scrolling through photos on my laptop. "Isn't that a bit rustic for a wedding? And buffet-style dinner? People expect a proper plated service." "We like the relaxed atmosphere," I defended. "It suits us better than something formal." Laurel sighed dramatically. "I just want your big day to be special, Vi. Not something people will whisper about afterward." "What does that mean?" "Nothing," she backtracked. "Just that weddings are as much for the guests as for the couple. First impressions of your married life and all that." As the wedding date approached, Laurel's criticisms became more frequent and pointed. She questioned everything from my choice of wildflower centerpieces so amateur to our decision to handle our own playlist instead of hiring a band tacky. The first time Laurel met Daniel's parents was at a dinner 6 months before the wedding. Thomas and Grace Harrison dressed well, but conservatively arriving in a modest luxury car rather than anything ostentatious. Grace brought a homemade pie for dessert, and Thomas brought a nice but not extravagant bottle of wine. Laurel seemed almost disappointed by their understated appearance. I caught her studying Grace's simple pearl necklace, with a puzzled expression as if she had expected something more showy from her future in-laws. "Daniel mentioned you work in real estate development," my father said to Thomas during dinner. Thomas nodded. "Been in the business over 30 years now. Started small and grew gradually." "Any properties we might know?" Laurel asked, a slight edge to her voice. "Mostly commercial buildings," Thomas answered vaguely. "Office spaces, some retail." I caught Daniel's eye across the table and saw his subtle amusement. His father was being deliberately modest about a portfolio that included landmark buildings in major cities across the country. After dinner, when Daniel and his parents had left, Laurel pulled me aside. "Are you sure about this, Vi? His family seems nice enough, but they're clearly not well established. You'll be starting from scratch with him." I almost laughed at the irony but maintained my composure. "We'll be just fine, Laurel. Not everyone measures success by the same metrics you do." 3 months before the wedding, I overheard Laurel on the phone with a friend while she was visiting our parents' house the same weekend I was there. "Viola's wedding." "Yes, I'm the maid of honor," she was saying from the kitchen while I remained in the hallway unnoticed. "It's going to be quaint. You know how she is always settling for less. The guy seems nice enough, but between us, I think she could have done better. The whole thing is going to be embarrassingly cheap if you ask me." I slipped away before she could see me hurt burning in my chest. Later that evening, I called Tessa and then Grace, needing to vent to people who actually supported me. "Your sister sounds deeply insecure," Grace said after listening patiently. "Happy people don't need to tear others down. Just remember, this is about you and Daniel, not her." The weeks leading up to the wedding were a flurry of final preparations. Despite Laurel's negativity, I was excited and focused on the meaningful day ahead. Daniel and I had written our own vows, planned a menu featuring foods significant to our relationship, and chosen music that told our story. 1 week before the wedding, my parents hosted a family dinner that included Daniel, Laurel, and a few close relatives. The tension was palpable, as Laurel dominated the conversation with stories about her recent business trip to London. "The client took us to this amazing restaurant, 3 Michelin stars," she was saying. "The wine pairing alone was over $500 per person." My mother was enraptured. How extraordinary was it for a big account? "Very big," Laurel confirmed with a self-satisfied smile. "The firm only sends senior managers for clients of this caliber." I felt Daniel squeeze my hand under the table in silent support. "Viola and Daniel, how are the final wedding details coming along?" my aunt asked, kindly changing the subject. Before I could answer, Laurel jumped in. "They're keeping it simple. Very simple. Right, Vi?" The emphasis on simple made her meaning clear to everyone at the table. We're focusing on what matters to us, Daniel said smoothly. Sometimes the most meaningful celebrations aren't about extravagance. Well said, my father commented, raising his glass slightly. It was one of the few times he had directly supported my choices over Laurel's commentary. As everyone was leaving, Laurel cornered me in the hallway. Look, I know you think I'm being harsh, she said, her voice low, but I just hate to see you settling again, Vi. You've always done this, accepted less than you deserve. This wedding, this guy. Don't you want more? Daniel is more than I ever hoped for, I replied firmly. And our wedding will be beautiful because it's authentic to us. Not everything is about impressing people, Laurel. The night before my wedding, I called my parents to confirm final details for the morning. Everything's set on our end, my mother said, her voice strangely tight. We'll see you tomorrow. Is everything okay, Mom? You sound odd. Just wedding jitters, dear. Get some rest. I hung up feeling uneasy but chalked it up to pre-wedding nerves. Despite the tensions with Laurel and my parents' lukewarm enthusiasm, I went to bed excited for the day ahead. Tomorrow I would marry the man I loved, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us. Nothing could spoil that. I had no idea what morning would bring. I woke up at 6:30 on my wedding day with butterflies of excitement in my stomach. The ceremony wasn't until 2 in the afternoon, but there was hair and makeup scheduled for 9, and my parents were supposed to arrive at 8 to have breakfast together before the day began. Today's the day, I whispered to myself, stretching in bed before pulling on my robe. My apartment was quiet as I padded to the kitchen to start coffee. My parents were staying in my guest room, and Laurel had insisted on getting a hotel room because 3 women getting ready need space. I expected to hear my mother stirring soon, always an early riser. By 7:15, when there was still no sound from the guest room, I knocked gently on the door. Mom, Dad, coffee's ready. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time, then slowly opened the door to find the bed perfectly made and the room empty. Their overnight bags were gone. A spike of anxiety shot through me. Had they forgotten something and run out? I checked my phone. No messages or missed calls. I dialed my mother's number, straight to voicemail, then my father's. Same result. That's weird, I said aloud, trying to quell the rising panic. Maybe they went out for breakfast to give me space. But they would have left a note or texted. I called Laurel next. No answer there either. By 8 o'clock, with still no word from anyone in my family, I was pacing the apartment, calling repeatedly, growing increasingly frantic. This made no sense. Where could they have gone on my wedding day? I was about to call Tessa when I noticed an envelope on the kitchen counter, partially hidden behind the coffee maker. My name was written on it in Laurel's distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened it and unfolded the letter inside. Dear Viola, by the time you read this, Mom, Dad, and I will be on our way to Paris. I know this will come as a shock, but I've been planning this surprise trip for months as a special gift for their 30th anniversary next month. The opportunity for first-class tickets came up suddenly, and I couldn't pass it up. I know your wedding is today, but let's be honest, Vi. This small-budget ceremony you've planned is hardly the event of the season. Mom and Dad were too polite to tell you, but they've been dreading making small talk with your teacher friends in some rustic barn. I'm actually doing them a favor, saving them from the embarrassment. We both know your wedding is just like everything else in your life, second-rate and settling for less. Daniel seems nice enough, but he's clearly not going anywhere career-wise. Another underachiever, just like you always attract. I told Mom and Dad we can have a proper family dinner to celebrate when we return next week. Maybe we can even help you plan a more appropriate reception later, something that won't make people whisper about how sad it was. Don't be angry, Vi. This is for the best. You've always been content with less while I've pushed for more. That's just who we are. Love always, Laurel. I collapsed onto a kitchen chair, the letter falling from my numb fingers. The room seemed to spin around me. My entire family had abandoned me on my wedding day. My sister had orchestrated this humiliation deliberately, and my parents had gone along with it. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. Tears streamed down my face as the full weight of it hit me. They really thought so little of me, of my choices of Daniel. They really believed I deserved this treatment. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually my phone rang. It was Tessa calling to check if she should come early to help. Viola, are you there? Hello? They're gone. I finally managed my voice barely audible. What? Who's gone, Vi? What's happening? All of them. My parents. Laurel. They went to Paris. Left me a letter. They're not coming to the wedding. What? Tessa's shock came through clearly. Stay right there. I'm coming over now. 20 minutes later, Tessa burst through my door still in pajamas with her coat thrown over them, hair wild. She found me in the same spot, staring blankly at the wall. Oh my God, Vi, she said, rushing to hug me. What happened? Wordlessly, I handed her Laurel's letter. As she read, her expression changed from confusion to disbelief to rage. That absolute witch, she finally spat out. And your parents went along with this? On your wedding day, I can't believe this. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling Daniel. No, wait, I protested weakly. I don't want to ruin everything. Vi, your family just abandoned you on your wedding day. This isn't something to hide from your future husband. She was right, of course. Daniel deserved to know, even though telling him filled me with shame. What would he think of me now, of the family he was marrying into? Daniel arrived in record time, his parents right behind him in a separate car. When he saw my face, he didn't need an explanation. Just wrapped me in his arms while I sobbed against his chest. I'm so sorry, I kept saying. My family is awful. You don't deserve this. Hey, he said, firmly tilting my chin up. You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. Grace read the letter next, her face darkening with each line. Thomas Harrison, usually so measured and calm, looked angrier than I had ever seen him. No parent should abandon their child like this, he said, his voice tight with controlled fury. Especially not on their wedding day. Grace sat beside me on the couch, taking my hands in hers. Viola, listen to me. Family is about who shows up, who stands by you. Today, we are your family. And we are here. But the wedding, I said miserably. My father was supposed to walk me down the aisle. What will everyone think? They'll think your family missed out on one of the most beautiful days of your life, Grace said firmly. This reflects on them, not on you. Daniel knelt in front of me. Vi, we can postpone if you want. We can take some time, regroup, do this another day, or we can go forward. Whatever you choose, I'm with you. I looked around at the three faces watching me with such love and support, then down at Laurel's cruel letter. In that moment, something shifted inside me. My family had tried to break me to reinforce that I was somehow less worthy, but here were people who saw my true value. We're getting married today, I said, finding strength I didn't know I had. Exactly as planned. I won't let them take this from us. Daniel smiled, relief and pride mixing in his expression. That's my girl. Grace squeezed my hands. In that case, we have a few calls to make. Thomas Harrison nodded, already pulling out his phone. On it. Calls for what I asked, confused. Grace's smile was determined. To make sure this is still the most wonderful day of your life? Your sister thinks your wedding will be second-rate. Let's show her just how wrong she island. While I showered and tried to compose myself, Grace was on the phone in my living room, speaking in the efficient, authoritative tone of someone used to making things happen. Yes, I understand it's last minute. Harrison Enterprises is prepared to pay triple the standard rate. Perfect. Have them there by noon. Tessa helped me with my hair as we waited for the makeup artist to arrive. My hands were still shaking too much to manage it myself. What's happening out there? I asked her. Grace has been on the phone non-stop. Tessa grinned. Let's just say your future mother-in-law is a force of nature. You know the Harrison name opens doors, right? I nodded uncertainly. While I knew Daniel's family was wealthy, I had never seen them use that influence overtly. Well, Grace is opening every door in Boston right now. Just wait and see. By the time we left for the venue, 3 hours later, I had begun to understand what Tessa meant. The makeup artist who arrived wasn't the local professional I had booked, but a celebrity makeup artist who had flown in on the Harrisons' private jet. My simple bouquet had been supplemented with rare orchids that normally required months of advance ordering. A designer had arrived with 3 veil options, each more exquisite than anything I could have afforded. This is too much, I protested weakly to Grace. Nonsense, she replied firmly. This is your day, Viola. Let us do this for you. When our car pulled up to the inn, I gasped. The already charming venue had been transformed. The garden where the ceremony would take place was now adorned with thousands of white roses and twinkling lights. A string quartet was setting up instead of the recorded music we had planned. Mrs. Harrison, the venue coordinator, greeted Grace as we arrived. Everything has been arranged as requested. The additional staff is in place, and the menu has been enhanced with the chef's premium offerings. As I was escorted to the bridal suite, I noticed something else unexpected: news vans parked at the edge of the property. Why is there media here? I asked Daniel, who had come to check on me before going to prepare himself. He looked slightly guilty. About that. Dad might have mentioned to a few connections that the Harrison heir was getting married today. Apparently, it's considered newsworthy. But we wanted to keep things low-key, I said, bewildered by the escalating grandeur around me. Daniel took my hands. I know, and I'm sorry if this is overwhelming, but after what your sister did, well, Dad thought it might be satisfying for your family to see exactly who you were marrying while they're sitting in Paris. The mention of my family's betrayal brought a fresh wave of pain, but also a small, admittedly petty spark of satisfaction at the thought of Laurel discovering that the underachiever I was marrying was actually the heir to one of the Umbrasis' largest private real estate fortunes in the country. Are you okay with all this? Daniel asked, genuinely concerned. We can still scale it back. I took a deep breath, looking around at the luxurious bridal suite. It's not what we planned, but yes, I think I'm okay with it. Your parents are being incredibly generous. They adore you, Vi, we all do. As the ceremony time approached, a new worry surfaced. Who's going to walk me down the aisle? I asked Tessa, as she helped adjust my veil. A knock at the door interrupted us. Thomas Harrison entered, looking distinguished in his tuxedo. Viola, he said gently. I know I could never replace your father, but if you would allow me, I would be honored to escort you today. Tears welled in my eyes at his kindness. I would be grateful, Thomas. Thank you. The ceremony was more beautiful than I could have imagined. The garden was filled with guests, including several prominent business leaders and local celebrities who were apparently friends of the Harrison family. As Thomas led me down the aisle to where Daniel waited, his eyes shining with love, I felt a curious mix of emotions: lingering hurt from my family's absence, but also overwhelming gratitude for the new family I was joining. Daniel had always seen me, valued me, loved me for exactly who I was. Standing before him, exchanging our vows, I knew with certainty that I had not settled as Laurel claimed. I had found something rare and precious. During his vows, Daniel went off script, adding words we hadn't rehearsed. Viola, your courage and resilience humble me. Today, when you had every reason to falter, you chose to stand tall and move forward. That strength is why I fell in love with you and why I count myself the luckiest man alive to become your husband. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. The reception that followed was nothing short of magnificent. The rustic barn had been transformed into an elegant wonderland, with crystal chandeliers, lush floral arrangements, and tables set with fine china and silver. The buffet we had planned had been replaced with a 5-course gourmet meal, served by white-gloved staff. A 10-piece orchestra played instead of our playlist. Photographers circulated discreetly, capturing every moment. A videographer conducted brief interviews with guests, creating what would later become a professional wedding film rather than the simple video recording we had arranged. Throughout the evening, I caught glimpses of news photographers at the periphery. The next day, I would learn that our wedding had made the society pages and local news, with headlines like Harrison heir weds in surprise luxury ceremony and education power couple. Harrison fortune meets teaching innovation. As Daniel and I shared our first dance, he whispered, "Are you happy, Mrs. Harrison?" Despite everything, I realized I truly was, incredibly happy. Your family has turned a potential disaster into a dream. Our family, he corrected gently. You're a Harrison now. The evening concluded with a spectacular fireworks display over the garden, arranged by Thomas as a surprise. As guests oohed and ahed at the colorful explosions overhead, Daniel and I stood wrapped in each other's arms. "Not bad for a small-budget ceremony, huh?" Daniel murmured against my hair. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had all day. Laurel would be having a conniption. "Good," he said, and kissed me under the sparkling sky. As we departed for our hotel, rose petals showering us from all sides, I realized something important. My family's absence, which had seemed catastrophic that morning, hadn't ruined anything. Instead, it had clarified who truly deserved to share in our joy. The people who had surrounded us today, both the friends who had always been part of our plans and the unexpected additions from the Harrisons' circle, were there to genuinely celebrate our love. For the first time in my life, I hadn't been compared and found wanting. I had been celebrated for exactly who I was. And it felt wonderful. The morning after our wedding, Daniel and I flew to Bali on his family's private jet, a wedding gift we hadn't expected. Instead of the modest beachfront hotel we had booked, we would be staying at the Harrisons' private villa overlooking the Indian Ocean. "I hope this is okay," Daniel said as we settled into plush seats for the long flight. Mom and Dad got a little carried away. I smiled, still processing the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. "It's more than okay. Your parents have been incredible." "Our parents," he corrected again with a squeeze of my hand. During our flight, I made a decision. "I'm turning off my phone for the honeymoon," I told Daniel. "No social media, no news, no family drama. Just us." He nodded. "Sounds perfect." For 2 blissful weeks, we existed in our own little paradise. The villa was stunning but private, with a staff that appeared only when needed. We swam in our infinity pool, walked on pristine beaches, explored local markets, and spent long, lazy mornings in bed. Not once did I check my phone or email. The morning we were set to leave Bali, I finally turned on my phone. It immediately began buzzing with weeks of accumulated notifications. Dozens of missed calls and texts from my parents and Laurel, starting from the evening of our wedding day. The first text from Laurel, time-stamped, about 8 hours after our ceremony, made my heart race. "Viola, call me immediately. Why didn't you tell us Daniel is that Harrison? His family owns half of Boston. Your wedding is all over the news here in Paris." Several more increasingly frantic messages followed. "Mom and Dad just saw your wedding on the international news in our hotel room. They're freaking out. Call US. Vi, I had no idea. Please call. We need to talk. I'm sorry about the letter. I didn't know. Please call back." My parents' messages were similar, full of confusion and belated regret. "Darling, we've made a terrible mistake. Please call when you can. Viola, we should never have left. We're so sorry. Please forgive us. We're cutting the trip short and coming home tomorrow. Please let us know you're okay." Seeing their panicked messages brought a complex mix of emotions, vindication, lingering hurt, and a strange sense of power I had never felt before in relation to my family. For once, I was the one who could choose whether to respond, not the one desperately seeking approval. I showed the messages to Daniel, who read them with a raised eyebrow. "Funny how your sister suddenly wants to talk now that she knows about my family's money," he observed dryly. "It's not even about you," I said, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. "She doesn't care about who you are as a person. She only cares about your status and what it means for how people see her." Daniel nodded. "What do you want to do?" I thought for a moment. Nothing, at least not yet. They abandoned me on our wedding day. A few apologetic texts when they realized their mistake doesn't erase that. "I support whatever you decide," Daniel assured me. When we returned home to Boston, I had dozens more messages waiting. Laurel had progressed from apologetic to angry to pleading. "It's been a week, Vi. Stop being childish and call us back. Do you have any idea how bad this looks for all of us? People are asking questions." "Please, Vi. I said I was sorry. What more do you want?" My parents were more consistently apologetic, but their messages revealed more concern about appearances than about my feelings. "People at church are asking why we missed your wedding. We don't know what to say. Your father ran into Thomas Harrison at the golf club. It was mortifying. Please help us make this right." Daniel and I settled into our new apartment, a spacious place in a historic building that his family happened to own. I returned to my teaching position, now working on expanding the special education program I had developed with a grant from the Harrison Educational Foundation. 3 weeks after our return, Tessa came over for dinner and filled me in on what I had missed. "Your sister is in full damage control mode," she reported. Apparently showing up in her office's Paris photos while simultaneously missing her sister's society wedding of the year has raised a lot of awkward questions. "How do you know this?" I asked, surprised. "Remember, my cousin works at her firm. He says Laurel's been telling everyone there was a family emergency that required her to be in Paris, but nobody's buying it. Since the wedding photos clearly show it happened as scheduled just without your family present." I couldn't help feeling a small petty satisfaction at this news. "And my parents?" "Back from Paris early, according to my mom, who ran into them at the grocery store." "Your mom looked like she'd been crying. They're telling people there was a misunderstanding about the wedding date." Daniel shook his head. "A misunderstanding that just happened to involve plane tickets to Paris?" As weeks passed, the messages from my family became less frequent but more desperate. I maintained my silence, not yet ready to engage. The wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too profound. One evening, in late summer, 2 months after our wedding, my mother left a voicemail that finally acknowledged the real issue. "Viola, I understand why you're not responding. What we did was unforgivable. We let Laurel convince us that her plan made sense, and we failed you completely as parents. There's no excuse. We're not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to apologize in person. We love you, sweetheart. Please call when you're ready." I played the message for Daniel that night. "She finally gets it," I said quietly. "At least a little bit." "Do you want to see them?" he asked. I considered the question carefully. Not yet, and not Laurel. Maybe my parents eventually. But I need more time. "Take all the time you need," he assured me. What neither of us said aloud was that this period of silence had been healing for me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing my family's approval or acceptance. I was living my life on my terms, surrounded by people who valued me. My relationship with the Harrisons deepened during this time. Grace invited me to join the board of their educational foundation, where my classroom experience brought valuable perspective. Thomas sought my input on a new project, creating affordable housing for teachers near high-need schools. "You have insight we need," he told me. "Your voice matters here." Such simple words, but they meant everything to me after a lifetime of feeling secondary. One rainy October evening, Laurel showed up unannounced at our apartment building. The doorman called up, and Daniel and I debated whether to allow her up. "It's your call," Daniel said. "I can ask him to send her away." I took a deep breath. "Number? I'll see her in the lobby. Not up here. And just for a few minutes." Laurel looked smaller somehow, standing in the elegant lobby with rain dampening her designer coat. When she saw me, she rushed forward, then stopped abruptly when I didn't move to embrace her. "Vi," she began, her voice breaking slightly. "Thank you for coming down." I nodded but said nothing. "I've been trying to reach you for months," she continued. "I need to explain about the wedding." "There's nothing to explain," I said evenly. "Your letter was very clear. You thought my wedding would be embarrassing and Daniel was an underachiever. You were wrong on both counts, as it turns out." She flinched. "I didn't know about his family. If I had known..." "That's exactly the problem, Laurel. If you had known he was wealthy, you would have treated him differently. Just like you've always treated me differently, because I don't meet your standards of success." "That's not fair," she protested weakly. "Isn't it you've spent our entire lives making me feel less than? The one day that should have been about my happiness, you deliberately ruined because you decided my choices weren't good enough." Laurel's carefully composed expression crumbled. "I made a terrible mistake. I'm sorry, Vi. People at work, they're looking at me differently now. Some clients have asked to work with other managers. Dad's golf friends are avoiding him. Mom cries all the time." I noted with bitter clarity that her apology was still centered on the social consequences they were facing, not on the pain they had caused me. "I'm sorry you're all suffering," I said, not unkindly but firmly. "But I'm not ready to pretend everything is okay." "What can I do?" she asked. desperation clear in her voice. How do I fix this? I shook my head. I don't know if you can, Laurel. Some betrayals cut too deep. I need time. As she left, shoulders slumped in defeat, I felt no triumph, only a sad certainty that our relationship would never be the same. Whether that was ultimately good or bad remained to be seen. 6 months after our wedding, I was thriving in ways I never expected. With support from the Harrison Educational Foundation, I had developed an innovative program for children with learning differences that was being implemented in schools across the district. My work was gaining recognition in educational circles, and I had been invited to speak at several conferences. Daniel and I had settled into a partnership that felt equal and supportive despite the disparity in our family backgrounds. We made decisions together about everything from household matters to charitable giving. His family's wealth was a resource we used thoughtfully, particularly for educational initiatives, but it didn't define our daily lives or our relationship. I'm so proud of what you're building, Daniel told me one evening as I showed him the latest data from my program. You're changing these kids' lives. Coming from him, the praise felt genuine, not like the conditional approval I had always sought from my family. One crisp autumn day, I finally agreed to meet my parents at a cafe halfway between our apartment and their home. Daniel offered to come with me, but I decided to go alone. I need to do this on my terms, I explained, but thank you for offering. My parents were already there when I arrived, looking nervous and older than I remembered. My mother half rose from her seat when she saw me uncertain whether to attempt a hug. I made the decision for her, giving her a brief embrace before sitting down. Thank you for meeting us, Viola, my father said, his voice thick with emotion. It means more than we can say. I nodded, waiting for them to continue. This was their opportunity to speak, not mine. What we did was unforgivable. My mother began, tears already forming in her eyes. Leaving on your wedding day, there's no excuse that could possibly justify it. Why did you do it? I asked simply. It was the question that had haunted me for months. My parents exchanged glances. My father spoke first. We've asked ourselves that same question every day since. The simple answer is that we let Laurel convince us it was a good idea. She presented it as this amazing opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime trip that would cost less because of some work connection she had. But it was my wedding day, I said, the hurt still evident in my voice. We know, my mother whispered. We convinced ourselves that you wouldn't mind too much, that your wedding was just a small gathering that could be celebrated again later. We were wrong, so terribly wrong. It wasn't just about missing the ceremony, I continued, needing them to understand the full extent of their betrayal. It was about what that choice said about how you value me, how you've always valued me compared to Laurel. My father looked genuinely puzzled. What do you mean compared to Laurel? My entire life, I've been the afterthought, the less impressive daughter. My achievements were nice, but Laurel's were spectacular. My career is meaningful, but Laurel's is prestigious. My choices were questioned while hers were celebrated. My parents sat in stunned silence as I continued. When you chose to go to Paris with her instead of attending my wedding, it was just the culmination of a lifetime of choices that told me exactly where I stood. My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling. Viola, we had no idea you felt this way. We never meant to make you feel less important. But you did, I said simply, again and again. My father cleared his throat, visibly emotional. You're right. Looking back, I can see it now. We did favor Laurel. Not consciously, but in small ways that added up over time. Her personality is so demanding. She takes up space. And you were always so self-sufficient, so capable. We thought you were fine. Being self-sufficient doesn't mean I didn't need your support, I said, or your approval. We are so deeply sorry, Viola, my mother said. Not just for missing your wedding, but for all the times we made you feel second best. You never were. Not to us. We're in family therapy now, my father added, trying to understand how we got here and how to do better. We'd like you to join us sometime when you're ready. Their willingness to seek help surprised me. It suggested a level of commitment to change I hadn't expected. What about Laurel? I asked. Is she participating in this therapy too? My parents exchanged another look. No, my mother admitted. She refuses to acknowledge there's a problem beyond the wedding day mistake. She says we're overreacting. I wasn't surprised. Laurel's entire identity was built on being the favorite, the successful one. Examining the family dynamics would threaten that carefully constructed self-image. I need time, I told them. I appreciate your apology and that you're working on yourselves. But rebuilding trust will take time. We understand, my father said. We're grateful for any chance you're willing to give us. We parted with tentative plans to meet again in a month. As I walked away, I felt lighter somehow, as if putting words to the lifetime of hurt had begun the process of releasing it. Over the following months, I met with my parents regularly. Sometimes the conversations were difficult, excavating old wounds and patterns. Sometimes they were awkwardly positive, all of us trying too hard. But slowly, gradually, we began building something new. Laurel remained absent from these reconciliation efforts. According to my parents, she was focusing on damage control at work, where her reputation had suffered after the wedding fiasco became known. On our first wedding anniversary, Daniel and I hosted a small dinner for the people who had truly supported us: Tessa and her partner Grace and Thomas, a few close friends, and somewhat tentatively my parents. It was nothing like the spectacular event of our wedding, just good food and genuine connection. During dessert, Daniel and I shared our news. We were expecting a baby in the spring. We're going to be grandparents, my mother gasped, hands flying to her face. If you want to be, I said carefully. This child will need grandparents who are fully present and supportive. We want nothing more, my father said earnestly. A chance to do better with the next generation. Grace raised her glass. To new beginnings and the family we choose to build. 2 weeks after our announcement, a letter arrived from Laurel. Not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter. Something so uncharacteristic of my technology-preferring sister that I was immediately intrigued. I opened it alone in our bedroom, unsure what to expect. Dear Viola, I've written this letter a dozen times and torn it up each time. Nothing I can say will undo what I did to you on your wedding day. The truth, which has taken me too long to acknowledge even to myself, is that I was jealous. Not of Daniel's money, which I didn't know about then, but of your happiness. You found someone who loves you exactly as you are. You built a career that brings you genuine fulfillment. You created a life based on meaning rather than status. Meanwhile, I've chased promotions and prestige and ended up with colleagues who turned on me the moment my reputation was tarnished. I've spent our entire lives competing with you, trying to prove I was better, more successful, more worthy of attention. It's exhausting, Vi, and pointless. And it cost me my relationship with the one person who always looked up to me despite everything. I'm starting therapy next week. Not family therapy with mom and dad, but my own individual work. I need to understand why I've been so driven to diminish your light. I don't expect forgiveness. I wouldn't forgive me either. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying to change, to understand, to become someone who might someday deserve to be in your life again. Congratulations on the baby. You'll be an amazing mother because you know what it means to love someone unconditionally. With regret and hope, Laurel. I sat with the letter for a long time, emotions swirling. This was the first time Laurel had acknowledged the deeper pattern, not just the wedding day betrayal. It was also the first apology that wasn't centered on the consequences she had faced. I didn't respond immediately. One letter, no matter how seemingly heartfelt, couldn't erase decades of competitive undermining or the wedding day abandonment. But I tucked it away rather than throwing it out, leaving open the possibility of a response when I felt ready. A month later, I suggested meeting Laurel for coffee. Daniel was concerned. Are you sure? He asked. You don't owe her anything. I know, I assured him. This isn't about obligation. It's about seeing if there's anything worth salvaging on my terms. Our meeting was awkward, tense, nothing like the easy reconciliation scenes in movies. Laurel looked different. Less polished, more authentic somehow. Thank you for coming, she said, none of her usual confidence evident. Your letter surprised me, I replied. It seemed honest. She nodded. Therapy is teaching me to be honest with myself first. It's harder than I expected. We talked for an hour, careful with each other in a way we had never been before. I set clear boundaries about what I could offer, not instant forgiveness or a return to our previous relationship, but small steps toward a potential new connection based on mutual respect. I'd like to meet occasionally like this, I told her. See where it goes. But I need you to understand that things will never be the same between us. I understand, she said quietly. I'm grateful for any chance at all. As spring approached, and with it the birth of our child, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The wedding day that had begun with betrayal had ultimately led to profound changes in how I viewed myself and my relationships. The pain had been real, but so was the growth that followed. We named our daughter Eleanor Grace, honoring both Daniel's mother and the quality that had carried me through the most difficult times. When she was born, my parents were at the hospital respectfully waiting their turn after Daniel's parents to hold their granddaughter. Laurel sent flowers but didn't presume to visit, understanding that trust was still being rebuilt slowly. Looking at my daughter's tiny face, I made a silent promise that she would always know her worth wasn't tied to achievements or comparisons. She would be loved for exactly who she was, with all her unique strengths and struggles embraced equally. The family I was building would be different from the one I had grown up in. It would be founded on acceptance rather than competition, on support rather than judgment. The painful lesson of my wedding day had ultimately given me the courage to break old patterns and create something healthier for the next generation. In the end, my sister's cruel attempt to humiliate me had led to my greatest liberation, the freedom to define family on my own terms, to surround myself with people who genuinely celebrated my happiness rather than diminishing it. That is the true wealth I gained on my wedding day, far more valuable than any Harrison fortune. What family dynamics have you experienced that shaped your understanding of love and acceptance? Has someone's attempt to hurt you ever backfired and led to unexpected positive changes in your life? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need this message today. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth is never determined by others' inability to see it.